Today I'm going to talk about why I think vetiver is one of the world's most useful plants.
If you've never heard of it before, vetiver is a deep-rooted grass used all over the tropics and subtropics for stabilising really steep slopes, trapping sediment, slowing water, preventing erosion. It's also used for treating wastewater and in perfumes, would you believe? And of course, as an ornamental, it's a pretty plant. Today we're going to focus mostly on using vetiver to stabilise slopes and prevent erosion.
So my property is situated on a slope, and as you can see, it slopes down to the left here in the frame. Up the hill was cleared at the time we first built our house, and because of that there was a lot of runoff coming down the hill. We were one of the first houses on the street, and so we were collecting a lot of people's silt and runoff, and it was all just going to the left out onto the street. So I originally planted vetiver to slow that silt down and collect it on our property, help us build our topsoil and obviously stop us losing any of our topsoil, and to help protect the plants, the young plants I was planting along the road. Now those young plants have since been replaced, plans have changed, and now I have new young plants that need protection.
The hedge itself is about 70 or 80 metres long, and I created this within 2 years from a starting number of about 30 slips. You can really propagate a hedge rather quickly.
Looking down the hedge, you can see how much sediment was caught in that first year or so. If you look on the uphill side of the vetiver hedge, you'll see it's about 30 centimetres higher than the soil on the downhill side. Now that's all topsoil. There hasn't been anything lost off the downhill side. That's what's built up on the uphill side. So it's an excellent plant, or an excellent technique, a vetiver hedge, to help collect runoff and prevent erosion.
Now there's a number of reasons for this. Firstly, vetiver has really deep, strong roots, sometimes as deep as 3 or more metres. Obviously in my soil they're not that deep because they'd hit rock before they got that deep, but nevertheless the roots go really deep, they're really strong, they hold back that soil. The hedges are also self-levelling, so as they start to collect sediment, each slip or column will actually root from further up the column, and so they'll start to build a terrace. And of course any terrace that can grow itself will self-level, and so over time you get a nice level terrace built up behind the vetiver hedge. And it's the sheer density of the grass that slows that water down, helps it soak into the ground somewhat like a swale, and gives that sediment time to settle. Here you can see just how thick the hedge is. Now when you plant a hedge, most of the manuals, and there are manuals because it's kind of like an engineering install, most of the manuals will state to plant the slips 10 centimetres apart, and so they very quickly grow into a solid wall of vetiver stalks. It is a clumping grass after all. It almost feels like you're working with a miniature version of some kind of clumping bamboo. It also makes a great chop and drop. Here you can see I've chopped my vetiver hedge and dropped it straight onto this avocado tree. The avocado tree likely also benefits from the deep vetiver roots that help break up the clay beneath it, and in fact this is the only avocado that survived on the property. For the rest of the hedge's length, I just chop and drop straight onto the row of trees below the hedge. You can do this with a machete or a string trimmer, just depends how energetic you feel. And if this wasn't enough, the vetiver plant, at least the commonly available cultivars, are actually sterile. They will have seed heads, but those seed heads will not result in seeds that grow into new vetiver plants. An extremely useful attribute of a plant that you want to use for these kinds of purposes. I also keep a small second hedge on hand just for doing other people's installs for friends of mine. Each one of these clumps of vetiver will give a minimum of 15 slips, so there's quite a bit of vetiver hedge worth of material here. This was my original propagation hedge when I was doing my own property, but I'm pretty much done here, so now I just keep it for friends that want a bit of starter material. I'm actually digging some up for a friend today, so it's a good opportunity to show you what's involved in the process. When the ground's very hard and dry like it has been recently, vetiver is extremely difficult to dig up. As I said, I did tell you about those roots before. So what I do is I flood the area, let the water soak in and soften the dirt, and then I cut through the roots with a shovel. The slips don't need many roots to get started. A centimetre or two is plenty, so don't concern yourself with saving roots. In fact, I cut off any excess roots. The less root the better. You want the vetiver to grow new roots in its new location as part of the hedge. So cut off the roots from the clump that you've dug up, and I've got a bit eager here. I started pulling them apart. First you need to cut the slips down, or I find it easier at this stage to cut the slips down to the correct height. So 15 centimeters, 6 inches or so is plenty. You don't want to leave the full leaves because obviously that's extra transpiration and you've just cut off all the roots. So cut the slips down to 6 inches or so and then break them up. Each clump that you break up that has a little bit of root on it is a slip. Okay, so if it has roots, it's good for planting. You can see here I've got well over the 15 I stated before. So what's that? 1, 2, and then I'll start breaking this clump up into all the separate slips ready for planting. As stated before, the slips are best planted at about 10 centimeter centers. Now I just go along. First I find a line on contour, and then I go along digging the shovel in and making a small cut into the ground. Then I just insert the slips in at those 10 centimeter centers, water in, and it's good to go. They do suffer from weed pressure a little bit in those beginning stages, so anything you can do to prevent weeds, whether you kill it off beforehand or mulch heavily, will benefit the hedge during those initial stages. I'm sending these out to that friend next week, so I'll place them in a plastic bucket with some water for a few days, just to keep them alive, and then I'll place them in a plastic bag with a moist paper towel in an express post sachet, and off they go. This is just a brief look into a plant that is perhaps the most useful plant for food producers that doesn't actually produce any food. If you've got a bank that needs stabilizing, or you've got an erosion problem, or perhaps you want to slow water down in a particular area, really do have a look at Vetiver and consider it as an option. I do have some information on my website, you'll find a link below, but to be honest, check out the Vetiver Network International. It's a fantastic website and resource for vetiver information. It's where I got all my information when I was first starting out. I'll paste a link down below, so if you're considering working with vetiver, check that out. Thanks for watching.